Hi, everyone. My name's Harrison Kramer, virtual magician from New York City, and you're watching Chuck Bushbeck Live.
And welcome to Chuck Bushbeck Live, Heart of a Champion. I'm your host, Chuck Bushbeck, with my producer, Joe Lee, at my side here. And we also have our first intern with us, returning once again from Keuka College. Did I do that right, Anthony?
Yes, you did.
Anthony Laurinaitis. He's doing his internship in sports management, and we just had to get him on. So, Anthony, I'm going to ask you, you ready for the Eagles? Or you don't like the Eagles,
I don't
do
like
you?
the Eagles. Ready for the Patriots game
I
today.
know, right?
Let's go Pats.
Now, Joe Lee, you're a big Eagles guy. So what's the
Indeed.
deal? What's happening today
Well, today
or tomorrow? I'm sorry, tomorrow.
Nothing important's
Yeah,
happening.
right. Well,
Tomorrow, Birds by a Million.
really?
Birds by a Million.
That much?
Oh yeah.
How about the? What do you think about the Nick Foles, Tom Brady thing? You see what they're trying to do? They're trying to psych him out a little bit.
Yeah. Well, we live rent free in that man's head right now.
That's great. Anyway, on with the show. My guest today, very special friend, Amy E. Feldman, Esquire, from the Judge Group, is with us today. Amy and I go back a few years, and I just from stuff that she does out there, either representing the Judge Group or just helping people in general. We needed to get her on the show today, and so be it. So, Amy, welcome aboard, and I hope you're doing well.
I'm awesome, Chuck. So excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Are you an Eagles fan also?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Oh, you
all
are.
the best people. No offense. All the best people are Eagles fans. I don't know.
I
don't know about how anybody could not be rooting for the Eagles tomorrow.
We just alienated most of the country, but no big deal. Well, Are you ready Are you ready to party, or do you do something at your home, or what do you do?
You know, it's funny because COVID,
Yeah,
which is not fun.
we've heard of it.
Yeah, it's a little thing. It's going around.
Yeah.
And we used to get together with a whole group of friends, and we've sort of COVID sort of put a damper on that. So we're mostly just the family, but everybody's decked out. We got our Eagles green, showing our colors.
Awesome.
I thought about wearing green today, but that's not my best color. I got to be honest. I'm willing to wear it because I love the Eagles, but it's really not a great fashion choice for me. So
that's okay. You go with fashion first, and we'll let the other stuff take care of itself.
You could just assume that I'll bleed green if necessary.
So you are our first legal representative on our show, and the reason you're not your typical lawyer. Hopefully you don't take offense to that.
No, I appreciate it.
You're a big advocate, and we were talking before the show that you're a big advocate for the average American or person in the world who needs to know what's going on and how to protect their legal rights. And so much of us, including myself, are clueless when it comes to a lot of this. But you also have some great stories. But I want to go, and what are you doing right now with the Judge Group, and who is the Judge Group?
So the Judge Group is an international business solutions company. That means that we staff people, we do projects for clients. So for example, if a client needs, they want a new network solution, they would call us. If they have somebody out in their help desk, they would call us. We also have a big medical staffing division. And what I do, so it's a company that has about 30 offices nationwide. We have one in Canada, we have two in India. And I'm the general counsel there. That means that I'm the head of the legal team over there to make sure that everything that we're doing is above board online. And a lot of it is just sort of learning on the job. I've been there for more than 20 years. And even so, there's always something new, between COVID regulations as recently as this week with what the Supreme Court is saying that companies can do, what they have to do, what they don't have to do. And I'm there to make sure that the people who work there and that the company itself is taking the right action to make sure that everybody stays on the right side of the law.
So when you came to the Judge Group, did you come on as an attorney, or did you evolve into that?
No, so I went to law school, and it's funny because when I was in law school, at the same time, I got a master's in education because I honestly didn't know whether I wanted to be a lawyer or glue macaroni to a plate, the elementary school art teacher. And I wasn't sure, which side of the coin I was gonna, be doing on a daily basis. But at a certain point, after in Pennsylvania, at least, in order to become a public school teacher, you need to have teaching experience. You have to have a couple of semesters in the classroom.
Yeah.
And this was after I had already gone through college, law school, master's in education. And at a certain point, you got to kind of start earning your own money. The time had come, to be on someone else's payroll.
Is that really important that you earn your own way?
Food, shelter. Yeah, some people think so.
Yeah.
So I got a job at a big firm in Center City, and I determined pretty quickly that it wasn't for me because I was in the litigation department. I mean, I did labor litigation, employment litigation, but by the time things get to litigation, Chuck, everybody has already lost. I mean, we won a lot of cases, or settled them, in a way that we were satisfied with. But by that point, by the time you get to the end of litigation, people hate each other. It's ugly. It's embarrassing. The things that come out about you and the other party are terrible. The way that you are, treating each other just really hardens every relationship. And everybody's always angry. I couldn't stand it. I just couldn't take it. So I actually went back to school while I was at the law firm.
Right.
I was ready to start becoming an elementary school teacher and was starting to take the classes to eventually get into the classroom when a friend of mine who was a legal recruiter said to me, it doesn't sound like you hate the law. It sounds like you hate practicing law in a big firm. And that was sort of eye-opening. Like, this is not the only type of lawyer there is. And shortly thereafter, I got a job at the Judge Group. And it's been fantastic because, as I say, I don't judge my success on how many cases I win, but on how many are never brought. So I like to think of myself as the cruise director over there. Julie McCoy, for those of us old enough to remember the Love Boat, people who are kind of a mediator who can talk about the ways to get together. Can't we all just get along? How can we get along?
Right.
So I liked it better.
I like the cruise director. I think you got a new thing going on. So I may hashtag you as the cruise director of law. Would that be okay with you?
Yeah, hopefully someday a cruise will be back in my immediate future, but not immediately. Hopefully it'll be back in my future, but not quite yet.
So intervening with other lawyers, do they share the same mindset that you do? Like, let's get this over with before we have to get to a court of law. Or are there guys that just want to tattoo you?
Sure. Yes, and yes.
Yes, and yes.
You know who the pit bulls are, and you know who the people are who are willing to negotiate.
Yeah.
But the mindset that I find mostly, because the truth is, luckily for me, I don't interact with a whole bunch of other lawyers if I'm doing my job right.
Yeah.
But I mean, we have another lawyer in my company, and then outside counsel who are very helpful, of course. But in general, the reason why sort of my career got off the way it did is because what I found when you're in a law firm, everybody knows a lawyer. Most people are lawyers or work for lawyers, hate lawyers, but no lawyers. And but when you work at a company, and for a while I was the only lawyer at the company, at the Judge Group, people will come in and ask you questions like, what if I need to sign my mother-in-law into a nursing home? What if I just broke up with my fiance and now he wants his ring back, but he gave it to me? Do I have to give it?
Yeah.
What if, like all kinds of other things. I just got arrested for driving under the influence. Do I need a lawyer? Like all the types of things that people ask. And I found that they were asking, a lot of the questions kept reappearing. People kept asking the same things. And then it occurred to me, you see all of these people all the time on television talking about, what's the next crime that we're focused on? Who's the next missing person? What about, DNA evidence at the crime scene? And that has nothing to do with the vast majority of people in the world. Like, if you have to figure out whether your DNA is at a crime scene, you need your own lawyer, right? But if you're just an average person who wants to know, I can't stand my roommate who never contributes to the toilet paper fund, how do I get her out of here? That's not something that you necessarily need a lawyer, but you need some legal knowledge. You have legal questions, and all you want is an answer, not a representation. And that's where I felt like the hole in people's knowledge was. So I approached the local news radio station, KYW, in Philadelphia. It's a great station. And I said to them, I feel like there's a need for consumer related questions and answers. And at the time they said, you know what, that sounds really great if you're willing to do it for free and on the weekends when the markets are closed. And so you could get a minute of the business segments time on the weekends related to business somehow. I said, terrific.
Let's do it. I got
please. And that's how it started. And then over time, it wasn't just on the weekends. It became every day. Now it's 4 times a day, with the segments. And then it became syndicated. And it's intended to cover the types of questions that people have. Again, there are times in your life that you'll need a lawyer. You're arrested for a crime. You're going through a bitter divorce, or any divorce, really. You've got some difficult will or trust issues, or you're, starting a business maybe, or you're ending a business. Those are times when you need a lawyer. But for just plain questions, for somebody who won't charge you $500 an hour to say, don't do that. Yeah. That's what I wanted to help answer. And that way, actually, it worked really well, because then that education degree that I had, about communicating knowledge really actually does come in handy. And that's how I got my start.
So working for the Judge Group, do you not only deal with Judge Group issues that affect the business, but also employees that work there? Do you work through their traumas and difficulty? And is there a lane you stay in, or is like everything's available for Amy?
So I'm very, very lucky, because the CEO of the Judge Group, Marty Judge, who was a kid, he'll tell you, one of 6 kids who lived in a row home in Delran, New Jersey, and started the business with a $2,000 loan from his dad in 1970 and grew it into a $500 million business. He doesn't get where he is because he's afraid to take chances. Yeah. And so when I said to him, I have this idea and I feel like there's a lot of people who are interested in getting this knowledge, he said, well, that sounds cool. And the truth is, I'm there to represent the company. If there are times, if an employee is in conflict with the company, it's the company that I represent. Right. Okay. And I don't represent individuals. So for example, if I have an individual who needs a lawyer, I'm not going to be their lawyer. Right. I'm going to suggest somebody that they'd represent. I mean, with some notable exceptions, which is, we had an employee who had a stroke, a young guy, but he had a stroke and he was in the hospital, and his new wife didn't have access to his bank accounts, didn't have, people think as soon as you're married, you automatically have access. That's not true. So she had to go to court to get a guardianship for him while he was comatose. And so, my boss, the CEO, actually asked me to step in, and I was happy to, although I didn't know a damn thing about it. And I really credit the ladies who worked in the office of the courthouse who were there to sort of guide me through, this is the form you need to fill out. And I went and I filled it out with the wife, and brought it back, and I said, no, you did it wrong. Try it this way. And I went back and I filled it back out, went back, and she said to me, closer, but you haven't quite gotten this. And so I did it a third time, and she was so happy for me. You go, girl, you did it. You did it. So we had this hearing for a petition for an emergency guardianship, because remember, these are young people who didn't have powers of attorney or other types of documents that I now always recommend. And if you don't have that before you are not able to make decisions, then the person who loves you has to petition the court to get that power to be able to pay your bills, their bills. She was pregnant at the time, so it was a lot that had to happen that none of us knew. And so she was kind enough to let me sort of learn on the spot. I mean, obviously it was, it was to help her, but, and then I didn't know it, but if you are taking away someone's financial control, you have to tell them that you are going to have a hearing at which time a judge will say, you're right, this person no longer has control over his finances. That control is going to someone else. And you can understand why that's a requirement, because there are times when people who are elderly, who have kids or other people who are worried they're not spending their money correctly, or who don't want them to spend money because they want to spend money the way they deem is correct. Right. You can't have a hearing that the person whose rights are being taken away doesn't know about. But picture this, when you're talking about somebody who is lying in a hospital bed in a coma, and it's my obligation, because I was the lawyer, I had to certify that he knew and had been told that there was this emergency hearing that was going to take place to decide about guardianship and financial issues. I had to go to the hospital bed. And I said to the nurse said, this was before COVID, but the nurse had said, this is really for family members or close friends. Are you a family member or a close friend? And I said, I mean, I had the permission of the wife. She needed me to do it. Yeah. But I said, yes, I'm acting as the lawyer on the family's behalf, and it's my obligation to give this notice of this hearing. And she looked at me and she said, he's in a coma. I said, I know, but I still have to do it. And keep in mind, this is a guy I had worked with for several years already. Yeah. He and I were very close friends. So it was like the saddest thing I'd ever done. I had to lean over him and read him this notice of the hearing and his rights. I can't imagine. So that I could sign a paper that said, I swear I've given him notice. And we had the hearing, and of course the wife got the guardianship, and she was able to make the financial decisions and pay the bills and so on. And thank God he recovered.
Oh, wow.
Miraculous. I mean, I really credit the neurologists, at the hospital, and everybody who cared for him, and his own strength, frankly. I mean, he worked so hard to get back, and he did. And so, several months later, I had the pleasure of going back to court with him there and his wife so that we could remove the guardianship. And I have to tell you, that woman who helped me those 3 times I got it wrong in the judge's office, the judge herself was there. Excuse me, the tip staff was there. Everybody was there. And when the judge agreed, I mean, I'm practically getting tears in my eyes right now, and this was so many years ago, but when the judge said, yes, we're removing the guardianship, everybody in the courthouse was crying, because they said, this is one of the rare cases. A lot of times it happens that it's with somebody who's elderly, or a minor who has intellectual disabilities, whose parents need that guardianship even as the child ages in order to be able to continue to care for the child. And this is one of the rare cases that was just like such a victory on every level. It was a happy ending. And it's like those types of things that kind of you look back on and think, how lucky am I to get to be part of that, to be able to help.
You are the cruise director lawyer. I am definitely, that is obviously a very emotional
board this way.
That is obviously a very emotional story on your end, and you kind of set the groundwork of where I want to go here. Now, we don't necessarily deal with the C word stuff, and I don't mean cancer. Okay, the thing that we've all been through for the past almost 2 years now.
That C word. There's another C word that I tell people they're never allowed to say at the workplace.
Well, you know what? We are a podcast. We can do whatever we want to do. But I'm going to try to keep us on track here, Amy. And you're very easy. You can very easily lead me off track here. And I want to stay cruise director. I want to stay on point here. Okay. So I'm going to speak from a non-lawyer perspective. Okay. So we're sitting there. I'm a dad. I have 2 grandchildren, 3 children. 2 of them are married, and everyone has their own little family dynamic going on. And I want to talk about the what's going on on a legal side, because that's your profession. What's going on as far as the rights of individuals moving forward? There is a feeling out there, and I'm just trying to temper what I think the general feeling is, that they want to follow science, but they also feel they've been misled to a certain extent. Okay, and when you're dealing with people that don't trust anymore, and I know lawyers got this bad rap, and you are so different, and that's why you're on the show. But the lawyers get that, don't trust a lawyer, car salesman, all that kind of stuff, and that's not necessarily true, obviously. But what would be your recommendation for people legally in reference to what's happening now in the workforce, as far as, and you just mentioned earlier in the show about the mandates and been overturned and things like that. Can you give us some inside information about your understanding of where our rights are from this C thing that's been going on for the past 2 years now?
Small little, global pandemic, sure.
Yeah.
So basically the way it is now, as we all know, we're very grateful that there's a vaccine, which doesn't cure everything, but it's the best way to help according to the CDC. But, you hit on another point, which is, I think, really sort of the crux of the matter here, which is before you can get people to follow the rules, you have to get them to buy into it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And to your point, and I'll say it, I'm a big believer in medicine. My dad was a doctor. But science is as much an art as it is a science. Medicine is not a perfect, you don't have perfect knowledge. Mm-hmm. And so I think that in the midst of something that was terrifying, the doctors, the CDC, the government was putting out the information that it had at the time it had it, which over time has either proven not to be exactly true, mm-hmm. or has been, as the disease sort of mutates, is not as true now as it used to be. So certainly there may have been some missteps, at least in communication. I think we're incredibly lucky to have the brilliant scientists and doctors working as they are to help protect us and keep us safe. But I also understand that there are people who feel, just like you said, that they've been misled. Yeah. So the question is, the big question, if we're keeping our eyes on the prize, is how do you cure the C word? It'd be nice to cure both cancer and COVID, but for the moment, we'll talk about COVID. How do you get people to take the steps that they need to take in order to keep themselves safe and to keep others safe? So just to give you sort of the landscape right now, the vaccine, as you know, in the United States is widely available. And there's 2 parts to it. The first is, what is the government forcing us to do? And the second is, what is your employer forcing you to do?
That's where I want to go to, Amy. I want to know the law of the land when it comes to legalities with this stuff.
So the government became convinced that people were not buying in or not getting the vaccines in the way that they should be, and they were trying to create mandates to put pressure on people to become vaccinated who hadn't been. Right. And the question is, what would give the government the right to say you have to be vaccinated? Now, some of this is a little perplexing to me because there have already been vaccine mandates. For kids to get to school, you have to be vaccinated. For healthcare workers, you've always had to be vaccinated. Obviously not for COVID because it wasn't a thing, but for tuberculosis, for hepatitis, for all kinds of other things that you are not allowed to be a healthcare worker unless you've had those. And in fact, and I know this because we place healthcare workers, the company that places a healthcare worker has to certify that we've collected that vaccine information about people. And this has always been the case. The question is there something about COVID that is so different or similar that the government has to make other rules that say not just healthcare workers, but all workers have to be vaccinated? And that's what you've heard about in the Supreme Court is exactly where we are, which is the Biden administration determined that people were not going to take these shots unless they were required to. And the only way to require them, because there's no law in the government that says, they could pass a law, but they haven't passed a law saying the government's going to say what shots you have, what medicine you have to take, with some exceptions. But they can say to employers, we're going to sanction you, employers, if you don't require that your employees be vaccinated. And so the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, which is not Congress, and it's not the president, and it's not the court, but it's an executive agency that was set up, is the one that has said and OSHA is dedicated to protecting the health and welfare of workers at the work site. And so OSHA has said the best way to protect workers is to make sure that they and their coworkers are vaccinated. Mm-hmm. And so they passed several regulations, one of which said that all employers who have 100 or more employees have to either require that their employees be vaccinated or are tested for COVID twice a week. And employers had to collect vax cards. And if they didn't, they were going to be sanctioned with a fine. And they had to set up and implement a testing process for those who weren't vaccinated. As it's gone all the way to the Supreme Court, and as one of the Supreme Court justices, Sonia Sotomayor said, it's not a vaccine mandate. It doesn't say you have to be vaccinated. It just says employers have to know if their workers are vaccinated. And then if they're not vaccinated, has to require that they get these tests. But that's not the only mandate that OSHA put out. It also put out a mandate for healthcare workers, and it also put out a mandate for federal contractors. So just this past week, the Supreme Court, what happened was as soon as this vaccine mandate was put out, people across the country filed lawsuits and different courts came out differently. Even different appeals courts came out differently.
Why would that happen? Why would it be different? What would be the reason?
Well, so some appeals court, because you look at the law and you say, if you are, if you're looking at the law in a way that's more expansive, you say, this is something that does affect the safety and health of the workers, and it's within OSHA's purview to protect the safety and health of workers. So this is within their authority. Others say, no, you're not really affecting the workers at the work site, which is OSHA's mandate. OSHA is supposed to protect workers while they're at work. Once you get a vaccine, you don't become vaccinated for the purposes of stepping onto the workplace and then take out the vaccine from your veins once you leave. You're not affecting safety and health at the work site. You are making a decision about a worker, and you don't have the authority to do that, OSHA. Right. So depending on the political leanings of the courts, and I don't mean necessarily Democrats or Republicans. What I mean is there are judges who believe the federal government doesn't have the power. That has to go to the states to decide. Others who say, yes, the federal government does have this power to force states or force workplaces to do it. And the question is, how much power does the federal government have to make this?
Let me say this. At my age, okay, so obviously been to school, had my early school vaccination so I can go to school. Sure. I don't necessarily get a flu shot every year. Okay, my choice. Do you, and back then, I hate to date myself, but back into the 60s, 70s, when I grew up, it was kind of a no-brainer. I think there was more trust, and I just want to throw this out there. My feeling, I have people on both sides. One are just so, I'm getting vaccinated, and I have the other ones that say, no, I'm not. The ones that are saying I'm getting vaccinated, they trust whoever, the CDC, whatever. The other people that don't trust the CDC and what's coming out because of what has happened, not only realistically, but they feel their freedom is being taken away. Where does the law come in on that, on both sides of that?
Right. So in general, a rational adult, an adult who is not, who doesn't have a special case like in need of a guardianship, for example, has the right to make personal health choices with some exceptions, right? You don't have the right to make a choice that affects the health of others, which is why there are cases where people who have HIV or actually other venereal diseases that they don't get treated or can't get treated and then don't tell their partners about. Well, now you're affecting the health of others.
Like hepatitis, that type of thing?
Hepatitis,
Yes,
exactly
okay.
right. Exactly right. And the other exception sort of around the margins is that if you're talking to people who are, in charge of kids, then there are times when the courts will step in. For example, there are times when kids who are going through cancer treatments, the parents say, I don't want them to get treated. And the doctors are saying this is a treatable form of cancer. And if you don't get it treated, the child will die. And hospital administrators have gone to court to get the power of the parent removed so that they can make the decision and make a healthcare decision. So there are cases where the government will step in to take over the healthcare decisions of somebody. But in general, an adult has the right to make decisions, rational decisions about their own healthcare. And that's where this is coming in, that people are saying, well, you're taking away my right to decide for myself. I've read some statistics, interestingly, Chuck, that have found that you're not changing hearts and minds by demanding, and you're not changing hearts and minds by screaming you're an idiot, and you're not changing hearts and minds by saying anybody who doesn't do what I do is either misinformed or an idiot. The best way to do it is to have a one-on-one discussion. Why do you think this? What would change your mind? What evidence do you need to show yourself, to prove to yourself that this is a good idea? And then once you start having those conversations, then it stops being it's us versus them, and it starts being it's you and me, and we disagree, but let's get to an agreement.
That's what I'm finding. Is that mandate, not the mandate to get the shot necessarily, but that's part of it. But there's such a diversity of information, of polarity, and that goes also. And I'm going to try to stay within the legal because I have you on. I want to get the legal stuff done. But what about the reference to the feds coming in, and what does the state have to say about what they want as opposed to what the Fed? Where's the line being drawn?
Right. It's a great question because it's so confusing right now.
It is. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, as of this week, and by the way, legal minds have differed on this question, but it went all the way to the Supreme Court, which just made its decision, which is that OSHA does not have the right to put out a blanket statement saying that all employers with 100 or more employees have to either track or test. That they eliminated that rule, so that obligation is off the employers to do it. But at the same time, because they consolidated all of those court decisions that had come out differently, they consolidated all of those cases around the same issue, which is what power does OSHA, speaking as the federal government, have? And so they heard separate cases. The first one was about the overarching 100 employee mandate. That one's been eliminated. Okay. So the Supreme Court said to OSHA, no, you don't have this blanket authority. But it did say there are situations in which OSHA would have the ability to do this. And one of them is in the healthcare sphere, right? You wouldn't want somebody who is unvaccinated to be working on the transplant floor of a hospital or the cancer wing, right? And because those people, where if they're on, the idea is if you're in a hospital and you're coming into contact with people who are in contact with vulnerable patients, everybody has to be vaccinated, and the Supreme Court upheld that. So as it comes to healthcare facilities that get federal government dollars like Medicare, Medicaid, and so on, the government can and now is saying to healthcare workers in those facilities, you have to be vaccinated.
Right. And that's the federal mandate that's overseeing the state mandate, or they're trying to impede what some of the states are saying. Because obviously people are leaving states to go to other states for their so-called freedom, right? or they feel confined, whatever the reason would be. But is this a nightmare for the lawyers of the world of how
Who
to
have to make
Yes.
nationwide policy decisions? You betcha. Because what the Supreme Court said, or as it was hearing these arguments, was, listen, we know, in the Constitution, the 10th Amendment of the Constitution says any powers that the federal government hasn't kept for itself, hasn't enumerated, will be within the state's rights to decide. Okay, so, and one of them is what's called police power, which is the ability to make decisions about the safety, the health, and the welfare of the citizens of that state. So even though the Supreme Court said that the federal government through OSHA can't tell every employer that they have to get their employees vaccinated or tested, it doesn't mean that the states don't have the power to make those mandates. And some states have or have already indicated they will. New York, New Jersey, California.
Right.
You can bet that you're going to start seeing those mandates. And in fact, in New York City, you already are starting to see those mandates that will affect people that say that they have to be vaccinated if they work, for example, in the city of New York. And then that's just the regulations. Within those regulations or beyond those regulations, companies can make a decision saying, if you're not vaccinated, we don't want you.
Where does, and I'm going to kind of go back to what I was saying, there's the almighty dollar that kicks in here. There's the political divide with everyone. There's a lot of things here. We're going through a transformation. I don't know, in this world. I'm more, having been a psych major, but I can throw all those books away too. So all my research has been in this field of epigenetics and quantum science and things like that, and art and math. And I have a view of what's happening is I feel that the old world is going away. The old I'm going just to comply is no longer a habit of the American public anymore. I think that when you say I'm going to loosen the jar a little bit, it almost feels like the jar lid has been taken off, and all the stuff that can come out has come out, and everyone has formed an opinion based on how they think. So I don't know what the solution is, and I think people do want to follow the law because that's what's made us, I think, America great. We followed the law. We protect people's rights like you do. Okay, where do we go from here? I mean, like, how do we resolve the individuals that feel that we're being lied to or they're being lied to, and the people that want, we want to trust the science, but we don't know. We're at a loss, and there's a dilemma here. And have you heard that, or am I the first person to have this revelation?
No, of course.
Okay.
And I hear it a lot. And when you sort of start seeing things, and you watch the news, and you see these people, and then you see, like there's some states like New York or New York City in particular, that's saying everybody has to be vaccinated, and then you have states like Texas saying employers are not allowed to mandate vaccines or mask mandates, right? They are so far at the other end of the political spectrum that you think, how can a country stand like this? Where are we headed? And I feel like I'd like to give us some comfort on that one.
Thank you. That's what I'm looking to get from you, is some comfort going forward here.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you read the way that the Declaration of Independence was set up, you understand that it is a living, breathing document that affects the rights of people. And it's so brilliant because it allows for people to have differences of opinions, even those that are in their minds worth fighting for, worth really taking a stand, having civil disobedience for. There are and have always been people who have fought bitterly on different sides of the issues. And I think if we sort of take a longer view, because what we're doing right now is, I feel like we are in a constant loop of watching TV and seeing violence. And what we know from television is that as soon as you put a camera on somebody, we know this from reality TV, they behave despicably. And we also know that the only images that we're seeing are of people on the far ends of any issue. And you start to think the world is going to hell in a handbasket and we're about to have another civil war.
Yeah.
When in fact, I think if you looked at, I mean, you mentioned the 60s before. In fact, there was much more violence in the 60s, but cameras weren't nearly as ubiquitous, so people didn't know.
Yeah.
And there was this idea that, you know, somehow there was a big fear. I mean, look, there was the Red Scare. People thought that as a child in the 80s, we were doing drills of what to happen in the event of a nuclear war, which in retrospect is kind of hilarious because they told us to hide under a desk, as if it was, hide under a desk because radiation
Seriously?
can't get under the desk. I don't know, but we were really afraid that the world was literally ending.
Yeah.
And even past that, you know, you had other issues of people who have been fighting with each other. You've had issues around 9/11. We have global wars. And even within the country, you know, we've had times when people have really believed that either a younger generation was going to come in and be the end of the world as we know it,
Yeah.
or that these baby boomers are allowing, you know, sexual harassment and, you know, the
Woodstock, baby.
Woodstock. Or the truth is, you know, there have been racial tensions, and with understandable reasons, but that have led to violence on the parts of either protesters or counter protesters.
Yeah.
And so I think if we sort of take a step back and think, people are riled up because the consequences do seem so major when you're talking about a global pandemic. But I think we'll look back in history and think, oh yeah, that was another time of angry discourse, but it doesn't change the Constitution. It doesn't change the way people look at it. I mean, the closest we got was at that insurrection, you know, which is now now in the news again, and how those people are being prosecuted. But if anything, I think that sort of brought us together as a nation, because while of course you have this very small minority of people who are ready to overthrow the government, I mean, you have a small minority of people who are in their basements playing Dungeons and Dragons. That doesn't mean the vast majority of the country thinks that. And I think, in fact, people are a lot more together than they think. I think now we seem to feel entitled to let the ugliness show with the words, and we don't use our pleases and thank yous anymore. But I don't think it's worse than it's been at other times in our history.
Yeah.
And I really do think we will get through this too, Chuck.
Yeah,
I do.
I think you're spot on, and I'm so happy that you are the voice of reason. You are the cruise director moving forward. There's no question about it. I believe that the well-being of the planet is much larger than what we've been told to believe on television. And to the certain extent, I've turned the TV off. I've about had it with both sides. I just don't want to hear it. And I do believe that there are a lot of great people in the world, but we don't hear that because it doesn't make the news. It doesn't set up for good argument sake, you know, for the television, whatever. So I want to know from you, and I want to get off this topic a little bit because you really segued where I wanted to go with this, as far as the voice of reason, okay? You're taking a legality, which you are very well within your mindset to elaborate on what you've done so eloquently today. And you're able to listen to other people that have a different point of view. And I think that's what makes Amy Feldman, okay? So I would like to know, where did you get that mindset? How are you able to manage it all? And you're a mother of two, obviously. Three. I'm sorry. Yes. Well, go back and tell me what was life like for you growing up, and where do you think these morals, or whatever you want to call them, were instilled in you to be the person you are today?
So I feel like I hit the jackpot growing up because I had two loving parents who loved each other and loved their two children, my sister and I. And interestingly, my dad was a Republican before he passed away, and my mom was a Democrat, and they used to drive to the polls together, fully aware that they would cancel each other's votes out, and grateful for the opportunity to listen to one another. And they really did. They really listened to each other. And that was a great so you couldn't ask for a better background. For one thing, because you could see all sides of the issue, and also because you could see respect being demonstrated for an opposing viewpoint. And also, I have to say, this is in the days before cable, when all you had was a half an hour of news, and it was or local news, which was generally, a fire here and a murder there, and we all thought, okay, that's fine. We weren't seeing, these global or at least national issues, and at least not at the time. The 80s was pretty calm when we knew who the enemy was, and that was a different country. That was communism at the time. That was Russia back then. It's funny how, everything that changed, what is it? The more things change, the more they stay the same.
Yeah. That was our producer, Joe Lee. He's got it down to a science. So, yeah. So obviously, okay, great parents. What was the point that you said, this is what I want to do for a living?
You know what? It was when I was in law school, and it's funny because I still had that moment of thinking, what am I doing being a lawyer? But when I was in law school, we had a mediation clinic. And what that was we were trained to, learn different, it was a lot of what you did, Chuck, with the psychology, which is, we started out with techniques about how to arrange the desk chairs in a room for the various power aspects that you wanted. If you wanted to have a discussion, the lawyer was supposed to come from around her side of the desk and sit at the other chair with the person who you're having a problem with. And as I was sitting in that class, I was thinking, well, this is stupid nonsense. And in fact, I use it all the time. And then what we did in that class was Philadelphia municipal court system, at least at the time, had cases, if they were worth less than $5,000, you had to go to mediation. Yeah. And so we were trained to mediate cases. And one of the most impactful cases that I had was actually two neighbors who had this big tree between their yards. And one of them, the branches on one of the trees was hanging over the one neighbor's driveway. No. And every day he had to get a car wash, and it was dropping leaves, and there was a fence there. So he was worried it was going to ruin the fence. So he had some tree service come in and cut down the branches, and it killed the tree. And then what happened was, or the tree died. It's not clear if that's what killed the tree. But okay, so this tree that has been this gorgeous 100-year-old neighborhood beauty is dead. And now the neighbors can't stand each other. They are furious with one another, and they are not speaking. And then everybody in the neighborhood has taken sides against each other. And so what happened was the one sued the other for the cost of the tree, which was, I guess it was $5,000 back then. It would be much more now. Yeah. And we mediated the case, and the neighbors eventually agreed. I think part of forgiveness is just understanding that you can't go back in time and change what happened. So moving on from the perspective of today, which is that tree died. Now we need to create a plan for what to do now. How do we move past it? And they agreed that they would together pay for, or the one who was suing would, instead of getting money, would agree that the neighbor would pay to plant a new beautiful tree that they would pick out together. And at the end of it, they were going to host a neighborhood get together and repair the relationship. It was like, oh my gosh, what an outcome.
Did you put this bug in their ear, Amy? Because it would sounds like something you would do. Why don't you guys just all get together?
No, I mean, this just came out of it. And actually, I have to give props to the Professor Doug Frankel, who is now, I think, a professor emeritus at Penn Law, who still has a lot of power in that mediation clinic, who's still very much involved in it. And, he sort of taught us the ways, and what he talked about, which, and it's not a new concept, but it made a huge impact on me, is the idea that in a lawsuit, every dollar that one person wins is a dollar that another person loses. It's a zero-sum game, right? But the point of mediation is that you are supposed to widen the pie, as they say, so that you get this slice and I get this slice. They tell the story about two brothers who are fighting over the last orange, and the mother can't stand it. And she says, Fine. She cuts the orange in half and gives them each a half, at which point they both start crying. And she says, you each got what you're owed. And they said, well, I wanted the skin because I wanted to peel it. And the other says, well, I just wanted to eat it. Right. So it's not about just separating it. It's figuring out what people want and how to get them what they want without the other person losing, and then living with what you can. That's the point of mediation.
And what case, give me something that has just been so crazy off the wall that you were personally involved in. I want to hear one more good Amy Feldman story.
Oh, that's a good, I actually feel, Chuck, like a lot of the cases that are brought today that I'm not personally involved with, and I wouldn't be, are cases, well, I have some personal stories too, where we had a case of, we had at the time, two contractors, two people that we had placed at the same client site. This is going back a couple years. And one of them borrowed $2 from the other. And the one who, had borrowed the money wouldn't give it back. She said, I don't owe it to you. They got into a screaming match.
$2?
$2. It's like, what was that John Cusack movie? Where's my $2? It was literally $2. Okay. The one would not give it back. They start screaming at each other at our client's site. They both then start spitting at each other.
No, stop it.
Spitting. Wait, it gets better?
Yeah, go ahead.
So then, of course, the client calls us. We fire them, make them leave the work site. They each had only one question, which is, well, did the other one get fired? And when we said yes, they said, oh, okay. They walked away happily because at least the other one had gotten fired. By the way, this is two women.
What?
Two women at the work site spitting at each other and only want to know if the other one got fired for it.
Is that human nature? I feel a little better because the other one's suffering.
Misery loves
that
company,
part,
Chuck.
yes.
Misery loves company.
Exactly what Joe just said. Misery loves company. That's it. So, yeah, there's one of those situations where there is absolutely nothing that can be done to prevent the type of idiocy that happens every once in a while.
And you love being a lawyer.
I do. I love my job. I love my job because I do get to work on things. I love the fact that you can make connection.
Wrong. Please try again.
That was my phone. Out it goes.
Everything happens on this show. How many different things have happened? You're just one more, thing in the pot here, Amy. So just go.
That is funny, yeah. But there's only something you can do a lot to help people be their best selves, and then at a certain point you're like, well, I guess this is your best self, and it involves spitting. Just go away.
What would be your soulful advice to people, not only as a career of you followed your dream and you talked about your upbringing and things like that. What thing would you mention to people that they should think about or feel moving forward in their life? Is it don't be afraid? Is it take the risk? Study hard? What is it?
Sure, all of those things, right? But the thing for me is I always used to get this advice like, figure out where you want to be in 5 years or when you retire and work backwards from there. And that sounds great. And it is the worst advice I've ever gotten because I have no idea. Your life changes, circumstances change, your priorities change. If you are going to be static in your, decision making, well, when I was 23 and before I had kids, I decided that this is what I wanted to do with my life. And now there's nothing I can do about it. That's it. You're really cutting yourself off from being open to what you're actually enjoying at the time that you're enjoying it. So at the time I was looking to leave the law completely, it was because I hadn't thought about other things or about the things that I did like doing. Yeah. And so if I were to give advice, it would be get a notebook, because I'm old. You could get a computer too, I guess.
No, I'm the same cloth. Believe
right?
me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So whatever it is that you write notes on, write yourself a note every day at the end of the day and put down a few things that made you happy that day. What did you like doing? And a few things that made you not happy. And you don't have to really focus on those, but you can start to see patterns. For me, that's what it was. I started to see patterns. What are the things that I like the most? What are the things that I like the least? So that instead of then knowing I want to go from this job to this job, or at least I want to leave the job I'm in, you start to see what are the things that tie my happy days together, and what are the things that make the bad days bad time after time. And then you go and you look for the things like that. So for me, it was being able to communicate with people on a one-on-one level, not being worried about every 6-minute increment for the purpose of billing for a law firm.
Right.
That I didn't like. But what I did like was making the real human connections, listening to people, understanding what their questions or concerns were, and then figuring out a way that I could add to their knowledge, remind them that common sense matters. Common sense plus a little knowledge is really a recipe for success, especially when you add a dose of kindness to it. When you step out of what your position is and you step back into a conversation with another human being, if you can get there, and that for me made me happy. And then I started expanding it so that it's not just a legal career, it's the media. So it's giving these legal segments. It's getting to talk to great people like you, Chuck.
Oh, thank you.
More and more. And you know, I wrote a children's book, which is going to be published in the fall.
Way.
Could understand that stuff. And it's not something that when you say, well, this is what lawyers do, it isn't necessarily, but it was for me because I love it.
Yeah.
So that's where we are.
Amy, thank you. You've been an inspiration. I mean, we're dealing with so much craziness right now, and you are a voice of reason. You are the cruise director, and I'm not going to let you live that down. I'm going to tag you with that. You are the.
I appreciate that. Somebody told me that I had legal information with mom energy. You know?
I like it. Joe,
please and thank you.
Joe, make a note of that. Mom energy.
Got it.
Or what is it?
Legal information with mom energy.
All right, we got it. We're going to tag that, okay? So you'll become famous for that. But I wanted to say thank you, Amy, for being on the show. You've always been so gracious from the time I've known you, and I really do appreciate everything you do.
You're wonderful, Chuck. Really, I couldn't have a bigger respect for you.
Thank you.
You're great on every level. In the way that you teach kids about how to be successful, both in the skills training and in their life training. I mean, it's wonderful. And I'm really flattered that you'd want to talk to me, and I'm grateful that you have.
We only let the best people on the show. I told you that, Amy. So thank you again. And I'm going to end it there. And for my producer, Joe Lee, on my right, go Eagles. Is that what it is?
Go Birds.
Go Birds.
Go Birds.
And Anthony Laurinaitis, our intern.
Go Bills.
Go who?
Go Pats.
Go Bills.
Go Pats. Oh, my goodness gracious. For our executive director, Jim Sims, and CJ DeRoma, I am Chuck Bushbeck. And we will see you next time on Chuck Bushbeck Live, Heart of a Champion. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you so much.
You got it.